Diane Dimitrov. I'm the Executive Director of Elvaic, and we are just delighted to have you here at our final event in our Facing Higher Education's Future series. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, the restrooms are just past the elevator if you came up in the elevator. Wi-Fi is Lehigh Guest, so you should be able to access that without any specific credentials. And if you have not yet noticed it, we have a collaboration showcase around the room, which is a poster session that features posters identifying a number of the different collaborations that exist today and have existed for a number of years in Elvaic, because today really is the culmination of our 50th anniversary celebration. So some of these are really long-standing collaborations, and we hope that you'll have a chance to take a look at some of those posters. Again, thank you for joining us today for our program, and now I am pleased to introduce Dr. John Simon, who's the president of Lehigh University, the chair of the Elvaic board, and our host for today.
Thanks, Diane. So good afternoon, welcome to Lehigh University and the 6th installment in the series Facing Higher Education's Future. This is also an opportunity for us to welcome new faculty and staff to the Elvaic community. Welcome to all the new faces in the room. I almost feel like I'm teaching a class. Everyone's in the back. Thank you. You guys must want to get an A. So for those of you who don't know, Elvaic is a consortium of 6 independent colleges in the Lehigh Valley: Cedar Crest, DeSales, Lafayette, Lehigh, Moravian, and Muhlenberg. And it was founded on the principles of making strong schools stronger through collaboration. We've actually been working on that for 50 years now, and we'll be commemorating that with a year-long series designed to help prepare our campuses for the next 50 years. Actually, I think we'll get a little insight into the next 50 years in today's speaker. Previous programs in the series have explored topics that I can tell you that us administrators have had on our mind and don't know how to solve. How to teach Gen X or Gen Z, changing demographics, issues in affordability and access at our institution, higher education economics in general, and the external expectations and perceptions of higher education that's happening in our society. Our topic today is the next steps for the future of higher education. It's very relevant as we think about what I consider to be a rapidly evolving landscape. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Brian Alexander. Dr. Alexander is an internationally known futurist, researcher, writer, speaker, consultant, teacher, working at the intersection of technology and education. After completing his English language and literature PhD at the University of Michigan in 1997, he taught at Centenary College of Louisiana, where he pioneered multi-campus interdisciplinary classes. From 2002 to 2014, Dr. Alexander worked with the National Institute for Technology and Liberal Education, a nonprofit working to help small colleges and universities best integrate digital technologies. There he said several roles, including co-director of a regional education and technology center, director of an emerging technologies, and senior fellow. Dr. Alexander speaks widely and publishes frequently. He's been interviewed by and featured in the Washington Post, MSNBC, US News and World Report, NPR, and the Chronicle of Higher Education, Pew Research, and the Connected Learning Alliance. He is currently a senior scholar at Georgetown University and teaches graduate seminars in their Learning, Design, and Technology program. Please give a warm welcome for Dr. Brian Alexander.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for an extremely nice introduction. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And just let you know that as I look at you, I look past you and see Lehigh Valley, and it's a little distracting. Every so often you'll see my gaze just drift up that way. It's not because of you. It's because, you know, it's a terrible competition. I'm very glad that you could all make it here today for all kinds of reasons. One is that it's good to get to know Elvaic It's good to get to know some of the schools in this consortium that I don't know, as well as to see some that I do. So that's very good to see Lafayette and Moravian and Muhlenberg. It's also good to be here at Lehigh Valley. By the way, my wife and I are really enjoying this. This is the Iacocca building. My wife and I lived in the Detroit area for a long time. So this is one of those cases where you see a named building and go, oh yeah, I know Iacocca. And then my children who are in their 20s are like, you're going to tell us about it, aren't you? No. We'll skip that. I wanted to talk about quite a few things today. David, is there any way that, can you press play on the video clip? Just want to give you a little scent of the future here. Have you all seen this before? This is Boston Dynamics, a robot company. And this is a police robot they have built that works with Massachusetts police. And when you see a clip like this, you may feel a bit frightened, or you might feel a bit adorable, those are nice, or you may just feel a bit estranged from reality. This is one of those feelings you get when the future becomes the present. And I just want you to think about that feeling before we proceed. Thank you for hitting play on that. I also wanted to say how nice it is to be up here because we lived in Vermont for almost 20 years. We lived half off the grid, on top of the house, on top of the mountain, basically. And you know, we raised animals, we tried to run a business on an extremely bad internet connection, but we really knew winter. So now we live in the Washington, D.C. area. We get to chuckle whenever they have a snowflake and people panic. So it's nice to be here and get a little glimpse of snow this morning. Now, why am I up here talking to you? Why are you stuck with someone who has more hair than any two of you combined? The reason is, I study the future of education, specifically colleges and universities. And this is what I've been working on for quite some time. And that's what we'll be talking about for the next few minutes. And as I go, I want you to think about, are there any instances of what I'm discussing that you see in your own life? If you're working as a professor, as a provost, as a librarian, instructional technologist, are you seeing echoes of any of these in your work? We do some of this work with a regular series of projects grouped under the header of the Future of Education Observatory. It includes a weekly video conference discussion where we take some great person in the future of education, be it the founder of Moodle, a major college president, be it a scholar, a critic, a venture capitalist, an entrepreneur, and then 200 or so people meet with them online to have a face-to-face conversation, which is pretty exciting. I also keep writing books until publishers stop me. So this, if you're curious about this, a lot of my notes from this afternoon are drawn from my new book, which is shipping this month, Academia Next. And if you want, there are little cards with little tiny discounts on them. So if you'd like to grab them, that'd be great. Or your library is good as well. I publish a monthly trends analysis, which takes a look at major trend lines reshaping education and technology. And let me just introduce a few of the ideas of them to you. I'm not going to read this whole slide to you. I just wanted to show you the overall big picture map. We track almost 100 trends. A bunch of them are in the area we call education and context. So that is things like enrollment, the finances of higher education, the demographics around higher education. We look at technology per se, so the big changes in technology, everything from social media to AI. Then we combine these. We look at education and technology. And then some of these we tie together in some interesting ways, which we'll do at the end of this talk. So to begin with, let's start at the largest possible level. Let's think about the world of higher education globally. Now, I don't mean this in the sense of globalization, the world is becoming more connected. We know of that. What I mean is we are experiencing the building of an enormous globe-spanning market for higher education, where increasingly faculty collaborate with other faculty around the world, and students move between continents or countries. There are a lot of aspects to this, which is quite fascinating. Among other things, you should look at China, which is building more universities and more university capacity than any civilization in human history so far. Now, this hasn't, for example, you can see a sign of this in terms of research output, where China is now the second leading producer of everything from intellectual property to scholarly articles and monographs. This isn't always working out so well. In the United States, we had more and more international students coming in until about 2.5 years ago, and then coincidentally, with the Trump administration, we've been seeing fewer and fewer international students. Just a quick guess, which nation in the world right now do you think gets the most international students per capita? China's working on it, but they're not very good at it right now. UK is falling. They used to be #1 for a while. Canada, the world's best friend. Nobody hates Canada. And Canada just does a wonderful job of drawing from all over the planet right now. But it's interesting to follow, and especially if you look at teenagers, where you can have, they're being marketed to by schools in Scotland or in Finland. And I mentioned this to some faculty and said, well, what could possibly appeal? I said, we looked at the marketing where it says, we won't charge you tuition. And the faculty member says, yeah, what's the big deal? It's a big deal. Where is this headed? It's possible that we might see ever-increasing internationalization so that we have something like a planetary university system. And just to go back, I don't know if you've seen this map before. This represents the higher education area in Europe. It is easier to transfer credits between institutions in that coalition than it is between states in the United States. So if you're taking classes at Irkutsk and you'd like to move to Britain or to Turkey, it's easier than it is to move across Indiana. So maybe that accelerates. Maybe we have more and more international students on every campus, more and more international research. Maybe we have more and more campuses that are effectively transnational. It's possible that we could see that. There are a lot of drivers behind that. We could also go the other way. We could have more localized colleges that emphasize local knowledge, regional knowledge, national knowledge, that step back away from the rest of the world. And we've seen this in a few places. Hungary, for example, just managed to expel a university because it seemed too international and cosmopolitan for them. Moving forward a little bit, one theme that you see in every country in the world for higher education is this dual drive. They want to improve the quantity of students getting higher education experience as well as the quality of that experience. And this differs how it shapes out from country to country. India, for example, right now is engaged in a massive effort to improve K through 12. China is interested in a completion agenda. Russia is trying to figure out how to support more or less all of academia. But these two poles are always in play. Now, as a futurist, we have to look at the future. And we use many, many tools, many analytical devices to try to figure that out. And one of the things that's most reliable for us is demographics. Did you all hear Nathan Grahl come and give a talk about demographics for higher education? If you haven't, I strongly recommend his book. He's a wonderful, accessible person. I'm going to not repeat what he said, although I rely on his work very heavily. I'm going to show you one slide of his that I stole from him. You'll see how it goes. But the key picture I want you to think of is globally. The transformation of the human population is going through something unprecedented and extraordinary. And we're just beginning to figure out what this means. It used to be back in the 1960s and 70s that we were terrified of overproducing people, that we would overproduce the world, that we'd be overcrowded, and the world would be overrun with too many people who couldn't eat. We backed away from that. And in fact, what's happening now is we're producing fewer and fewer children. And meanwhile, our adults are living longer and longer. What does this mean for us? Let me give you a visualization. This is the image of human history until around 1900. This is a demographic analysis of Nigeria. And every horizontal slice represents about 4 or 5 years. So if you look at the very bottom, you can see that historically humans generated lots of babies. And then mortality set in year by year, whittling us down until we only had a few seniors. This is Japan. This is what the developed world looks like now. We've taken that pyramid and flipped it upside down. And there are all kinds of fantastic reasons for this. How many of you work in allied healthcare at some level? What position, what part of it?
Physical therapy.
Excellent. You guys are fantastic. Anybody else? But only you get to bear the burden of this fantastic thing. Your field, because of the amazing developments in medical science, including public health, we're living longer and longer. Because, especially of the rest of you in the room, the more education women get, we know in almost every single case, the more education women get, the fewer children they have. Plus, we have developments in reproductive knowledge, where we have more and more women with more access to reproductive control in their lives. As a result, we've redone the face of human civilization. And a lot of this has happened in our lifetimes right now. And you can find country after country like this. This is Germany, for example. If you go to South Korea, typically, in order to have a population be stable, you need to have about 2.1 kids born for every adult woman. South Korea right now, that number is at 0.89. So the population is beginning to shrink. What does this mean for society? We're just starting to figure this out. What does this mean for retirements? What does this mean for K through 12? What does it mean for all of you? Is that this pipeline is narrowing worldwide. Now it's uneven worldwide. This is the best map I can find that shows what's happening to this. Key thing here is the blue nations are the ones that are still producing kids. Let me zero in on that a bit. Oops, excuse me. And you can see almost all of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, with a few in Central Asia. If you look at Europe, the United States, Latin America, we're going down, the opposite way. So in fact, if you look at the total human population, we may max out in the next 20 years and then start going down. So think about what this chart means, among other things. If you're looking for great 18-year-olds, if you're looking in, say, Ukraine, you're wasting your time. You might want to look at, say, Sudan or Saudi Arabia, in which case for higher education, you have to recalibrate and reconfigure an awful lot of stuff, just for starters. Now, I mentioned Nathan Groff, and this is just one of his slides I want to show you, because these patterns are happening in the United States overall. Now, they're inflected by the 2008 financial crash, which really put the kibosh on us producing children again. And you can see that there's this fertility alley going from the Dakotas to Texas that's still producing kids. Almost all those states have very, very small populations to begin with, so it's not statistically that significant. But the Midwest and the East Coast, the Northeast, you can see we're just giving up. We're going to shrink like crazy. My wife and I moved from Vermont. I'm 52. I'm typically the youngest person in the room, which can be exciting in a lot of ways, especially when you're under World War II veterans. You can feel really chipper like a kid. But after a while, it's a little daunting to think about. So again, if you look through the Midwest and the Northeast, it's not surprising. That's where so many of the stories about mergers and campuses closing and other crises are coming from. Let's move on. Quantity and quality. Hello. Did you
Hi.
just walk in?
I did.
And you were trying to sneak in?
No,
So no one paid
no.
attention to you?
I'm good.
I totally
Charlene
believe-
knows. I'm good.
Where are you from?
Muhlenberg College.
Excellent. Great school. Welcome. We're just talking about children. Now I'm going to talk about something much more challenging.
Okay.
In higher education in the U.S., we also have these two Qs. We really want to give more people more experience, more post-secondary experience, and we want to improve the quality of it. And our quality is pretty high compared to the rest of the world. But we still want to improve for all kinds of reasons. And one of the ways this is playing out is our student body is changing in some exciting and interesting ways. So how we improve the quantity and quality of our teaching and our students gets a little more difficult. For example, we still often think the typical student is the typical student who goes to a lot of your campuses. An 18-year-old who's going to be there in a residential experience. Perhaps one or both of their parents went to college. Perhaps they had a good prep background, either a prep school or high school equivalent. And maybe when they graduate, and let's just say 4 years for the sake of argument, then afterwards they will have a nice job and donate to you as lavishly as they can for the rest of their lives. And that student is a minority in the United States, and a shrinking minority. It's a niche. If you serve them, you are serving a kind of historical relic, an inherited part of higher education. Instead, depending on your numbers, between 35 and 40% of students are adults. Think back to the demographic again. If we're not producing that many kids, and we're producing lots of senior citizens, think about that as a growth area. Think about how many adults need to learn and reskill. On top of that, we also have a growing number of non-white students, especially Latino and to a secondary degree Asian. Those numbers are growing rapidly. And we know that means a lot of cultural changes, a lot of political changes, a lot of support is needed. We also have more and more first-generation students. Our idea of getting more and more post-secondary experience for as many people as possible, we maxed out the students whose parents went to college. We took care of them already. Now it's the students who haven't gone to college, who are less well prepared, who will be more challenged, and accordingly are more difficult and more expensive to teach. Beyond that, two more challenging populations. We have more and more veterans. Has anyone here seen that Washington Post piece that came out this week about the war in Afghanistan? If you haven't seen it, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It feels like the Pentagon Papers from the war in Afghanistan. But this is no the beginning of it, which says the war in Afghanistan is the longest war ever fought in American history. longer than Vietnam, longer than the Revolution, leaves World War II in the dust. One side effect of that is that we have a large number of veterans. Roughly 700,000 people serve in Afghanistan, and more will still keep serving. Veterans need, in many ways, higher education. They will organize, they will share notes, they will compare notes in order to figure out the best possible experience. In my experience of working with almost 1,000 colleges and universities in the US, most of them don't reach out to veterans very effectively, if at all. That's a population we have to serve. And beyond that, we have the growing number of students with learning disabilities for various reasons. Sometimes because they have better technologies for detecting them, sometimes because of NICUs, which are better and better, sometimes because the students are just more informed. Sometimes we don't know the reasons for learning disabilities to spike up, and we have a large number of them. Put this together, and you have a more challenging student body to support, teach, and help succeed. There are fewer of them, which comes as a bit of a shock. How many of you went to college or university before 1990? Okay, good. If you went after 1990, just put your hands up. Hello, okay. I'm from the 20th century, we did things differently. But one key thing that happened in our lifetimes is that the number of students going to college and university started booming around 1982, 1983. It grew enormously. And for the next 30 years, we experienced one of the largest expansions in American higher education. There's no name for this. No one has called this, the 21st century cusp or anything. But it's as big as the baby boom going in the 50s and 60s, as big as the huge growth in the late 19th century after the Morrill Land Grant. It's a huge, fantastic story, big success, up until about 2012. Ever since then, the total number of students enrolled in American higher education has gone down every semester, bit by bit. We're about 8 to 10% below where we were in 2012 right now. Why is this happening? Partly it's because of these guys. The for-profit sector has hemorrhaged students. It's largely been collapsing, partly because of its own bad reputation, partly because of Obama-era regulations, which the Trump administration hasn't really managed to undo, partly because the outcomes were so horrible. They've really, really lost. If you think that doesn't affect you, think again. None of those students have gone back to higher education anywhere else. They just left the system. Community colleges have been losing students because our unemployment rate is so low, and community colleges usually only spike upward when we have high unemployment. But other than that, we're not really growing at all. So if you think about colleges that depend on tuition for revenue, like most of them, this is a challenge for us. Now, we can go a little further and think about who's taking what classes. And you could study this year by year, but it's important to look at it from some deep time, look at, say, 20 or 40 years. And this is one of those moments where, as an English PhD, I feel a little bit embarrassed. So this is some pretty good data from this historian, looking at what fields are getting more and more students. Am I right in your way? I'll open it. If you look at the top right, you look at the fields that are growing, and this won't surprise you, I think, but let me just make sure you've got some data for this. Exercise science. Hello, PT. Computer science, nursing, health and medical, computer and electrical engineering, engineering. Do you notice a trend there? Right. STEM, first of all, and the full spectrum of healthcare. It goes on. Math and stats, physics, biology, you get the idea. Those are the fields that are growing in size. Now, let's look here at the bottom left, shall we? The fields that are shrinking by as far as 33%. History, religion, area studies, humanities, literature, philosophy. It's an old story, but it's one that's playing out very, very fiercely right now. The humanities are getting clobbered nationwide. Now, as a humanist, I find this sad and upsetting, but I can't deny the facts. And we can talk about the reasons for this, but this trend I want you to pay attention to. When I look nationwide at campuses that are opening new programs or closing them, it's pretty clear. They like to open programs in allied health and STEM. If a program is going to close, the odds are it's going to be foreign language. Now, there are a lot of ways of thinking about how we manage to handle all these students through all these programs. And one of them is very, very interesting, is that we do a lot through community colleges. Community colleges are the biggest sector in American higher education. They do more with less than any of us. And among other things, they increasingly do humanitarian support. That is, they offer childcare, they offer political support, they offer financial assistance, even in very small ways. It's an important point to think about as our student population changes. Now, that's the student population. How about the rest of us who actually work in higher ed? And by the way, who here is in LVIG for the first year or on LVIG campus for the first time? Hi, welcome. That's a very nice beard, by the way. I want to congratulate you. What department are you in? Excellent. Well, clearly, excellent. If you were going to recommend a computer programming language for every undergraduate to take, which language would you pick? Good answer. Thank you. I poll every computer scientist about this. It's also a good way to start fights among computer scientists. Because someone will say, Python, heck with that. I do R, no, PHP. And welcome.
It depends on what you do.
Yes, it does.
If you're doing networking, you want Java. Robotics, you want Python. If you're doing embedded, you want C.
And if you just want to introduce
There's
them.
not a
See, this is great stuff. You're Lehigh. And you're here, Lehigh.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to read the badge, and my eyesight fades, and I'm staring at your chest, which is embarrassing. It really does depend. And if you want to introduce computational thinking, then almost any of these would work to some degree. Thanks. But us, faculty who teach computer science, staff, how have we changed, and how are we changing? This is an interesting representation of the past nearly 40 years of labor on campuses. And I just want to show you some things that might not surprise you, but some that may. The largest field that has grown on campuses in terms of hires and full-time people is full-time non-faculty professionals. So you want to think about people who are in the library, custodians, IT people, deans, everybody else that we generally call administration. That's the largest increase. Then followed by that, part-time faculty. See, the majority of teaching faculty in the United States are contingent. They're temporary. They're adjuncts for the first time. So it's maybe 1910 or so. Full-time tenured faculty has grown a little bit. And you can see there's a charming unicorn there just to explain how that works. But this is a huge development, and it's one that outside of academia people don't really recognize. But that we have moved to a temporary faculty in a lot of ways. And that, I mean, there are differences. Some small liberal arts colleges still have majority tenure track. Some community colleges have something like 98% adjunct. But this overall pattern is very powerful. So for example, instructional technologists, should they support tenure track or adjunct faculty? Tenure track faculty have governance, they have political stability. Adjunct faculty, there are more of them perhaps. There are a lot of ways this plays out. Now, where is Jim, the macroeconomics? Right here. Hello. So this isn't the worrying slide yet. We're getting to the worrying slide. This is one about how income has changed over time. So one of the fascinating developments for those of us who lived in the 20th century is that the balance of economic strength in the US has shifted strongly. Let me explain a little bit of the history. This maps onto income inequality. The higher the number, the more unequal. So if we had 100%, it'd be Jeff Bezos and the rest of us are broke. The horizontal axis is time. So if you go back to 1910, coming off of the Gilded Age, you can see that we were pretty good at income inequality. We were fairly unequal. And then something weird happens. From about 1914 to about 1950, income inequality plummets. The reasons are kind of obvious. You have two huge world wars that simply destroy wealth. You have the Great Depression, which ditto. And you have a lot of redistributive policies all over the place. The countries represented here are the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia, and every one of them did something like national health care in Britain, the New Deal in the US. So, from about 1950 to about 1980, we were the least unequal economically we've ever been. It's very bizarre to think about. And this also doesn't really have a name. Some economists have called this the Great Compression, which I think is a great term, but it has no legs, as the advertising people say. But think about that. Think about that timeline. And in this timeline is all of you. Because not only were some of you born here, But this is where higher education was rebuilt. This is when we said the federal government should have a role in higher education. We built the Department of Education. We said federal loans for higher education. This is when we said state schools should blossom. This is when we said the community colleges should be everywhere. And right about here is where we started the enrollment boom. And then, in the early 1980s, income inequality started ratcheting back up. And it's gone up ever since, and it hasn't paused or slowed down a whit. We're, in fact, right now around 1915 levels. Swiss Bank that I follow called our time the new Gilded Age. They may be right. In which case you have to think, first, one of the reasons why higher education is having such a hard time right now is we were built for a different time economically. Second, think about your students and what future they want. Are they trained for the 1960s? Or are they being trained for the time of escalating income inequality? How does that change what you teach? How does it change how you support them? How does it change fundraising and philanthropy? I gotta keep moving. We've responded in a few different ways for how we finance higher education. And one of them is that state governments have decided across the board, blue state and red state, rural and urban state, that we're going to spend less money on public higher education. And this is one of my favorite quotes. I'm from the University of Michigan, that's my alma mater, and this is from one of our presidents who the engineering students have a great nickname for it. They call it Dude, because his name is Duderstadt. So let me just read this to you very, really quickly. Over the past 30 years, we've seen our public support decline from 70% of our operating budget to less than 6%. This is not extreme. I know a lot of Penn State schools went through a similar arc. As university president, I used to explain that during this period, we'd evolved from a state-supported institution to a state-assisted institution to a state-related to a state-located university. In fact, now we remain only a state-molested institution, which is fascinating to think about. We decided as a nation that we would privatize the funding of public higher education. It's public almost in name only. And there are some exceptions. North Dakota until this year actually had a gusher of oil, so they spent some of it in higher education, which is great. But generally speaking, in our lifetimes, we went from public higher education to privatized public higher education. Why does this matter? Because this is how we paid for it. There's no other way. We financialized higher education. We go in debt, into large amounts of debt. I just want to say the number, $1.6 trillion, because it's staggering and mind-blowing. But that's the number where we are now. It's continuing to rise. No, well, by the way, nobody else on earth has done this yet. It's kind of like American healthcare finance. For some reason, no one thought this was a good idea and imitated us. I don't know. Maybe that's telling us something, right? This is a game show. I don't know if you've ever seen this, where the prize is your student debt gets paid off. No. And who holds the debt? Women more than men. I put all these trends together under the header, crunch time. Because American higher education is under ferocious, ferocious pressure. And if we're going to think about where it goes over the next 25 years, over the next 50 years, we have to grapple with all these forces. We have to figure out what they are doing, how they are beating on higher education like a hammer beats on an anvil, and what kind of resulting schools we have. Now, hold that thought there, and you can change gears and talk about something a little bit different, which is what technology is doing. Love this photo. Can't get enough of it. It's called Tabloid and Tablet. I just love it. So if you want to talk about technology, we could talk about it until tomorrow. There's so much to discuss. And I promise I'll speak English the whole time. If you two computer scientists who can help, I'll pick on you if needed. But just think about things we don't have a lot of time to talk about. I mean, in our lifetimes, in the past 50 years, we've added enough carbon to the Earth to change the entire planet. This, by the way, is a map of the Northwest Passage. And I still can't wrap my head around this. For centuries, people from Europe tried to sail across North America from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of people perished in that course. They never found it because there was no such passage, because it was blocked with ice until a few years ago. Enough of the Arctic has melted that you can take a boat all the way across there. I have friends who have done that. It's a pretty easy trip. It's mind-blowing to think about this. Other technologies. We're frantically trying to figure out how to reconfigure human energy sources. We're still burning coal. I wish we should stop. We're thinking about nuclear. Obviously, we're doing more with solar and with wind and with water-based power. We're trying to build nuclear in new ways, including fusion. We're building new materials like graphene. We're also editing the human body. I don't just mean as our physical therapist here, but at the level of genetics, we have more and more tools that let us alter biological life in incredible detail, including CRISPR. And on top of that, we edit the body even more grossly, where we're able to replace parts of the human body. When you think about these issues in the Olympics about prosthetics, those were pure science fiction debates in the 1970s, and now they're everyday life. How human are you if you have a replacement ear or a replacement leg? Are you still fully human if your brain chemistry is being altered by psychopharmaceuticals? How human are we still? Pure science fiction questions, everyday ethics now. Speaking of human, we can edit the human brain in some very interesting and direct ways. Now, let's assume a lot of these technologies are just happening. I have a whole list of these, and you recognize, I'm sure, all or most of these. Everything, social media, crowdfunding, think of mobile computing, think about everything, gaming and digital storytelling. Let's think about always-on technologies. Think about surveillance, think about hacking. And all of them are layered on top of each other. So you've got mobile computing, and you have video, and you have gaming, and you have blockchain. That's all right now. Let's go a little further forward. So here are a few things that keep happening, no matter what we do. We keep increasing the speed of our technology. We increase the memory capacity. We make more and more data of it, and more of it's born digital. And we keep scanning the physical world. In fact, speaking of which, haven't done this yet. Physical world captured. There you go. We make technologies that are smaller and smaller, that are more and more networked. In fact, we could talk about the world as being part of the Internet of Things right now, where you can have more devices that are embedded into everyday life. So perhaps we could have those coffee makers that are networked. We definitely have devices for media that are networked, including a projector. Imagine having your car, imagine having parts of your house, imagine having parts of your body that are networked through the internet so you can find them and control them. People talk a lot about virtual reality. I want to give you just a quick little introduction to it. If you haven't had a chance to play with virtual reality, you absolutely have to. It's a bit like the Matrix. You can't be told about it. If you think about a ViewMaster, that's a good start, but you really have to play with it. There's a wonderful tool called Tilt Brush. Has anyone here played with this? No? Yeah. Well, what fields are you two in?
Structural technology.
Both of you?
Yep.
Keep an eye on those characters, right? You're going to want to use them. So Tilt Brush is a drawing program, like Microsoft Paint, a basic drawing program. The thing is, you draw with your hand in space. So the first time I used it, I would put this goggle on, I was standing in front of something, and I started drawing, and I changed my palette. I can't draw at all. And I was drawing this, and I thought, I'll make a door. So I built this door, and then I walked around it. I took a look at it from the side, and then from the back, and I spun it around. Then I walked through this magic door. Then I realized half an hour had gone by, and I was still playing with this. It's a different experience of creativity. There's a lot going on with VR. This is one of my students who was casually making some fun art as she was working. The flip side of VR is augmented reality, where you add the virtual information to the physical world. So if you've ever walked around with Google Maps on your phone, and it tells you to turn right, I know none of you have driven with Google Maps in your hand. That would be unsafe and wrong. So you've all done it. But augmented reality is a great way for combining the physical and the virtual worlds. And there are more and more ways of doing this. The thing you want to watch for is Apple's augmented reality product. Whenever it comes out, it will have a big impact. But you can combine, oh, by the way, this is one of my favorite VR photos of all time. On the right, the most powerful man in the world with a computer strapped to his face, trying to look as cool as he can because that's how he plays, but look at her on the left. This is how I see the future of VR. She could care less. She's checking Instagram, right? She's doing work on a spreadsheet, perhaps. My point is that VR will stop being so exciting, or just become another tool, like PowerPoint. That's the world you want to think about down the road. Now you can combine these tools. You can combine VR and AR into what's called mixed reality. And I'll show you an example of that down the road. What does this mean for you in education? There are a lot of technologies at play. Remember that chart I showed with those full-time professional, non-faculty staff? Some of them are in IT because of this. We keep making more and more stuff, more LMSs, more mobile computing, more media capture, all of this stuff. I can't bring all this to you, it's too much. Let me touch some of the highlights. We're making more data. Students go through your systems. They take your classes in computer science or economics. They generate data. They apply to your school, there's more data. They graduate, there's more data. And you can do things with that. You can edit that data. You can analyze that data. You can make it more predictive. You can use it to make your students' lives better. This is a huge development that we're still pressing on very closely. We can also do it very badly. If you haven't had a chance to read Cathy O'Neill's book, I strongly recommend it. It's the first of a whole series of books which find out ways that we can use data analytics badly. We can reproduce inequalities. We can reproduce unequal power supplies. This is the best title of a book in the 21st century, by the way. You have to say it out loud. But it's a math destruction, right? But this is a problem that we're grappling with. These kind of inequalities are often marked by gender, by race, by economics. So as we capture data about students, as we try to use it to support them, we have to figure out ways of doing it that are just. Another key point. Looking around the room, I'm not seeing a lot of devices out here. I do see a very nice PC right there. I see the, well, that's my PC. I'm not seeing a lot of phones, perhaps because you're hiding them. Perhaps because you're Apple fans and you figure I've got my Android here and you don't want to be embarrassed. I understand. But mobile is how we apprehend the world right now. Desktop computers, laptop computers are increasingly marginalized. We just do more and more stuff with earpieces, with earbuds, with phones, with wrists, with tablets. So you think about this in education and technology. Have we redesigned our stuff to be mobile first? If you've ever viewed a normal website on the phone that isn't designed for it, it can look horrific. It could be a nightmare. Right now, I keep using Canvas on my phone, and it misses a few features that drive me completely crazy, right? We have to be mobile first. And if we're mobile first, guess what? In the United States, blacks and Latinos use more phones for more stuff than white people do. There's some interesting economic reasons for that, including not having a computer at home. So if you want to reach out to those two populations, maybe you should push more content to mobile first. Mobile first might not mean a device you touch at all. A fun thing to do with Alexa, by the way, is to ask her if she is Skynet. That's the evil computer from the Terminator movies. She has an answer ready for you, by the way. I'm not going to tell you. This is the interactive portion of the lecture. But you don't have to touch this computer. You just walk into your room and you speak to her. And it's not just Alexa, there's the Google speaker, there's the Apple speaker. My point is, you can take all this computational power and weave it into the everyday world so that it physically disappears and you can still interact with it. Imagine, you have a good beard too, I just realized that. What's your part of that? What do you do?
I work in institutional research.
Fantastic.
Data analytics.
I'll just sit down. Well, if we want to visit, I'm sorry, Zane?
Yeah.
Excellent. So if I visit Zane in his office, it might be that I don't see a keyboard or a screen. That I ask him a question about how many students are enrolled from, say, west of the Mississippi, and he simply asks the computer an answer, and it speaks back an answer, or projects it on a wall. We can really change our computational paradigm pretty quickly. The flipped classroom idea is pretty widespread. You're seeing this in K through 12 as well as higher ed. In fact, it's kind of hard not to do a hybrid classroom. If you want to get people not to use computers in the classroom, you have to tell them not to. That might not work. You may have to order them not to. That might not work. You may enclose your classroom in a Faraday cage. That will work. But the minute they leave your classroom, they'll whip out their phones and you're over. Right? The key thing here is to use the physical face-to-face classroom, especially in liberal arts college, for what it does best. For interaction, for communication, for role-playing, for discussion. Now, some of you use Canvas for LMS. Some of you here also use Moodle. Anybody else use anything else? Where is that? I'm sorry? What Canvas? The sales. Very good. Thank you. So we've got the three of the biggest of the LMSs out there right now. So how does the LMS world change? The LMS has been around for about 20 years. It's pretty long in the tooth technology. It's possible that the LMS may shift to including more open web or open content. It may actually link out and back in more often. We may break up the LMS into little pieces that interact with each other and other tools. It may connect with the social world, because the LMS is pretty asocial. We might not. The online world, the open world, is more and more abusive and more frightening. It may be that we keep people in the LMS because it's a safer space. So we want to have students talking about Java, and we want to have them do it in Moodle or in Canvas or in Blackboard, because we think that's a safer place for it. Now, here's one technology that we want to keep thinking about, because if you're ever afraid of being generation gapped, this is one of the universal technologies. Everyone loves video. Children, seniors, everybody in between. We make video, we consume video. You look at YouTube, you look at Netflix. Netflix eats up, what, a third of campus bandwidth right now? I mean, these are enormously powerful technologies that we absolutely adore. We use video conferencing technology, even though it might not be very good. What do you all use? Are you all using Zoom now? Mostly. Blackboard, are you using the Blackboard video conferencing tool? You use Zoom, very smart. It's much better than Blackboard. We use this all the time. We use Skype, especially if you're abroad, but we love making video. This is a video wall from one of my clients. It's an interactive video display of the campus and its athletic history. And you can just walk around this wall and page through all the different sports over time. There are a lot of different ways to use video. Think about just how far that goes. Now, I mentioned mixed reality. I just want to describe to you a really good example. If we have time, I can pull the video for you. What you're looking at is a protein molecule. You're looking at it from the point of view of a scientist at Worcester Polytech named Dmitry Korkin. He's looking through his helmet. It's a Microsoft HoloLens. He's looking at this, and he's manipulating it by two things. He's using his hand to pinch and zoom like you do on a phone or a tablet. He's using his voice. So you can say, zoom in, zoom out, spin along different axes, change method of display. The skeleton display, what's it called? When you just have like thin lines between parts of the protein atoms? Yes, exactly. And you just command that, it flips over to that. And then you can ask it to track different connections between different atoms. This is all in his office. So as he turns his head, the whole molecule shifts with it. And you can walk down the street, I don't recommend this, but you can go over the street and still be looking at that molecule as it goes. In fact, two of us could sit next to him and see the same molecule and interact with it. And you, not wearing a helmet, you wouldn't see any of it. You might think we'd go around the bend. This does not involve a keyboard. It does not involve a screen. It does not involve a mouse. It is a completely new computational paradigm, and it already works. What I'm showing you is about 3 years old. Dimitri's new project that he's working on is for the human brain to be able to visualize. So think about doing this with any other topic, with a museum, with a city, with a galaxy. A couple of more things, and then I want to wrap this up. The open revolution continues. That is open educational resources, open access to scholarship, and just open pedagogy. The amount of material that students use right now for textbooks that is open is growing and growing. We may see a flip to mostly open within a few years. Open access to scholarly publishing is also growing. There is a semi-legal, not really legal, website out there, which I won't name, except to say it's called Sci-Hub, which has more scholarship than any other website on earth right now, including legitimate ones. We're pushing on that very hard. We continue to use technology to develop new ways of doing scholarship, everything from simulations to the digital humanities to law. Do any of your colleges have a law school attached to them? No? Oh, that's good. I don't say this to make fun of lawyers. Everyone does. It's easy and fun. But because law schools have been suffering very badly over the past few years. Now, your scholars communicate mostly through social media or through email, more than face-to-face. And we share things online. I want to skip a couple of these, though, because I'm conscious of the time, looking at the sun beginning to go down. I want to make sure that we get some questions from you. 3D printing is a technology you've all heard about. If you haven't played with one, let you know that it's very exciting for the first few minutes and then very boring right after that. Here's the 2D printer, the Xerox machine. Here is the Star Trek replicator. 3D printing is right about here. It's heading this way, slowly but surely. And we're printing all kinds of great stuff. This is some of my students printing out some work. 2 of them had a great project last summer. They were interested in printing and what it meant in the history of education. So they went online, found a wonderful 3D map of a 15th century printing press, printed the printing press about yay big, found some plates where they'll put them in the press, found a screw which they printed, put it here, and they were able to basically publish individual sheets of paper, some of which had access to a QR code, which took them to their online augmented reality essay describing what they had done, which is pretty cool. 3D printing is pretty exciting. It's worth studying in terms of economics and society, and it's interesting to use. French professors always print an Eiffel Tower with it. It's like a nervous tick. 3D printing ties into makerspaces in many ways. Do all of your campuses have makerspaces, or is there one nearby? You two are nodding. Have you all been to a makerspace or hung out with them? It's kind of like being in shop class but with no teacher. That sounds bad, but it actually really isn't. It's a place where students, or anybody, can learn by making and playing with stuff. And stuff can be everything from wood to tin to plastic to yarn to sheets of paper. And the ethics of it and the pedagogy of it is very non-vertical. It's mostly peer-to-peer learning. So, technology, in many ways, gives you the chance to try to improve what students do and how they learn and how faculty work. And this can be a vital, vital way forward if we're facing crunch time from non-technological forces. So what does this look like? If we hit fast forward on the chronometer and look at the next 50 years, here are a couple of things to think about. Have you all seen this picture? Have you seen this before? This is the least imaginative publication in human history. This is the one that you buy because it has no sense of hype or puff or entertainment or humor. All Consumer Reports does is look at everyday life, at objects. They looked at us and said this. So it's possible that we'll see a shrinkage of American higher education over the next 20 years. And we'll see fewer institutions. The ones that do exist are smaller. Fewer faculty, fewer staff, and fewer students. I mean, you think about all the pressures that were mentioned before, there's a lot of reasons for this. In 2014, I came up with an idea called peak higher education. So American higher education reached a maximum level that's been going down ever since. And I asked them, please tell me this is wrong. I don't want this model to be true. It's been true ever since. I get lots of predictions wrong. This is one that I've gotten right so far. It plays out in a particular way. How many of you play chess? How many of you play chess well? Okay, I'll stay away from you. I'm very bad, very, very bad. There's a move in chess you can make called the queen sacrifice. The queen is the most powerful piece in chess. And you give it up as a desperate move to win the game. On the chessboard of academia, in many ways, tenured faculty are the queen pieces. They have tenure, they have longevity, they have governance roles. They're very powerful at times, depending on institutional culture. I've been tracking campuses that fire tenured faculty over the past 5 years. I don't mean adjunct faculty, contracts not renewed. I don't mean staff. I mean profs who've been given tenure. Sometimes campuses do this by declaring financial exigency. Sometimes they do it by just ending a program. This has been rising. In fact, in Albany, New York, one school did this, and the next year, the president received an award from the local chamber of commerce, and they were picketed by some of the surviving faculty. I call this the Queen Sacrifice Gambit, and you'll see more of it to come. How we pay for higher education, one of the secrets that's always worth repeating, always worth telling people about, because nobody outside academia really gets this, is our sticker price is not our price. You all know about this idea, right? We have a sticker price, but we actually discount this in reality. Remember my chart about increasing income inequality, this is how we roll with it. The Economist magazine in Britain calls this how America does means-tested higher education. The more affluent you are, the more money you pay. The less affluent, the less you pay. But that amount of discount just keeps going up and up and up and up. Past 50% on average for a lot of private undergraduates in the US. This is not very sustainable. So, where else does this take us? Well, one is it may change our libraries. Our academic libraries are very powerful. They're often geographically and perhaps spiritually essential to the campus. The foot traffic nationwide has been declining. Checking out of physical materials has been declining. And publishers don't make checking out digital materials any easier. So it's possible that we'll see libraries morph in some interesting ways. We could see them shift from collection development to information and digital literacy. I used to talk about digital literacy back in the 1990s. I couldn't get faculty excited. After 2016, everybody's interested in it. They could support information entrepreneurship. They could go out into the community and ask people what their information needs are. I'm blanking your last name. You do this with research, right? This is what I was asking you about your librarians. Could your librarians go out into the community and find what a startup or a business or a company or a nonprofit or a family has some information need, and they can help provide it? And you, of course, do research with it. So the two wild cards to leave you with. What happens with climate change and all of you? Look ahead 10, 5, 20 years. So think about a couple of things. Think about schools that are on the coastlines of the US and around the world. What happens as the water rises around them? Say the water rises a meter, just a yard plus. Does the campus build its own seawalls? When Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, I don't know if you all saw this, the Goldman Sachs financial enterprise built their own walls. It was the most Goldman Sachs thing they could possibly do. You know, and if you went nearby, they'd probably let you go in, but with all these, they protected themselves. Do schools do this? Or do we help the local community do this? Or do we look fondly at the higher mountains and think maybe we should relocate our campus? University of Michigan, in the 1970s, they tried to move the entire campus north. They got halfway and they got stuck. So now there's two campuses, which is pretty funny. But do we do this? Do we move to West Virginia? Do campuses in California move to the Rockies? Do campuses in the Midwest look longingly at the northern Midwest or Canada? Think too about your disciplines. Remember I showed that chart of majors and programs? What happens to petroleum engineering? Do students on campus protest if you have a petroleum engineering degree? Do you get more and more interest in classes in, say, in computer science that are based in low carbon technologies? Do you ban the use of Bitcoin or blockchain? It's computationally intensive because it burns a lot of carbon. How do students respond to all this? How do faculty respond? Do you travel less? We're just starting to talk about this, and we happen to say more about it in a few. And here's the other wild card. Fun book on automation. It came from a couple of MIT scientists about 6 years ago. The conclusion of the book was, automation is big. We'll see more automation. We'll see more AI. We'll see more robots. But what we're not going to see are self-driving cars. That's just too hard. The next book came up with them saying, sorry, we were too conservative. In fact, yesterday, news broke from the BBC that a self-driving truck went across the US in 3 days. Automation is obviously taking over in a lot of ways. I always show this slide because it's a drone with a chainsaw. I have no justification for showing this slide. It just satisfies me in a deep way. But we're using automation in all kinds of ways already. We're using them at war, not with chainsaws, but we're using them with drones. We have ethical questions of when a drone makes a mistake, who is responsible? Is it the pilot? Is it the software manufacturer? Is it the hardware manufacturer? We're using robots to make content of all kinds. Already happening. We have robots that write stories in meteorology, in finance, in sports. But you say, Brian, we can't automate everything, right? We can't automate creativity. That's our special thing that humans do that nobody else can do. Humans are very creative. Look at all the stories we make. Fine. This photo I took of my son. My son is now taller than I am, so I photograph him because I can't grapple with him being that big. So I took a photo of him. He's also sleeping, so I embarrass him. Took this photo and fit it into a Google program called Deep Dream. Deep Tree did this. I repeated the process. We did this. And then that. No human being involved. That was Google being creative right now. You already have filters in some of your cameras that are to some degree autonomous. Google Photo every week sends me some creative ideas that's done to my photos, some of which are not too good, some of which are much better than I could do. When does that completely bypass us? If you've seen Hollywood movies, you go, software could write a lot of that right now. Think about this expression. This is from the guy who's the head of Alphabet, the company that runs Google. I think we'll evolve in computing from mobile first to an AI first world. Imagine that in your own software, in Moodle or in Blackboard. Imagine if you have the LMS that helps you think about your class design. Imagine if you have your enterprise systems that help you think about enrollment. Imagine having all kinds of intelligent assistants from all your educational tools. Now we can go still further. And there are a lot of problems that we have to really push through that we have to think about for automation. Again, think of robotics as well as AI. This is my hopeful vision. See, I use a program called Duolingo. Do you all use this? Have you all tried this? Yeah, I was just using it in German, which is great. Went to Germany. It was okay. I could talk with Germans all right. Until I apologized to one German. So I'm sorry, my German has a Russian accent because Russian is the language I know best. And she said, don't worry, I'm not threatened. Good moment of European politics right there. But Duolingo is not everything. It's pretty competent, kind of 101 level language. But it doesn't teach me culture. I can't ask it questions. It doesn't give me that sense of actually being in Madrid or Berlin or wherever. So maybe what happens is the typical classroom becomes a kind of cyborg experience. Yen, I'm sorry, what do you do it? Yeah. Oh, the two of you. But what do you call a group of people who do institutional research? Is there a noun for that? You would know. But Yenny, let's say I'll pick on you. Let's say you're teaching a class in institutional research. Somehow how to do this. So you're there in the classroom physically, but also you're running software that can analyze the students' choices, their experience in their classes, how they've done in your class so far. It runs models and extrapolates how they might do in your tests and quizzes, so then you can use that to shape how you do. Who's the political scientist? Was that you, Christine? So Christina's teaching political science, and since you teach everything in political science, right? So she may have a class where they're learning comparative poli-sci, where they're comparing political systems of two different nations. So she has them running software that analyzes stats about each country. Then she looks at elections, and she has them run all kinds of GPS tools to understand where election votes are labeled out across the terrain. She gets to combine these over and over again. All these faculty work together like this. That's one future, called the cyborg future, where teaching is deeply, deeply embedded with automation. Now, it might not work that way. It may be that we simply replace faculty with software. You think, oh, we never do that. There's a long history of that. And I mentioned Duolingo. Duolingo is free. Campus that has tuition that's too high, that's worried if they can't keep the lights on, they might decide they don't need so many Spanish faculty if they can give their students Duolingo. Moreover, think about what happens if we can have classes that are creativity-based. Writing classes, art classes, music classes, and outsource part of that to software. This is an option that's going to be on the table. As a futurist, I have to look at all possible options. That can happen. Think about it this way. A different problem. You may have heard the idea of robots taking our jobs. So speculation at this point. There's some interesting problems. From about 1800 to about 1990, whenever we invented new technology, it clobbered somebody's jobs, but made new jobs. Creative destruction, for Joseph Schumpeter, but made more jobs. So did this area ever have an ice industry back in the day?
Nice.
It did?
Off the river here.
Yeah, perfect. And ship it down south, right? So if you're not familiar with this, this is the idea. Before refrigeration was invented, we would take ice from the northern parts of the U.S., carve out chunks of it, and send it usually down a river or by horse, down to places like Florida, where they're dying of heat. They can have some ice. Well, we invented refrigeration. Too bad for the ice industry. But think about how big the HVAC industry is, right? It's enormous. We kept doing that time and time again. Horse and buggies didn't do too well with cars, but the car industry is vast and global, right? We kept doing that until the 1990s. And that doesn't seem to be happening. When Kodak closed, Instagram employed about 300, maybe 600 people. Kodak laid off, what, 60,000 at the time? It was a huge, huge layoff. So it's possible that moving ahead, we'll be facing underemployment or unemployment. In which case, here's your challenge. What are you teaching your students? If you're preparing them for a career, say in physical therapy, what if they're only working 30 hours a week, or 20 hours a week, or every other year? What's the rest of your curriculum for? Do the humanities come back? So you have downtime, and the students can actually care about Aristotle again? Maybe so. You should rethink your curriculum for that. Or you think about, what don't computers do well? And that's what you focus on. And then here's this other problem. My father is in his 90s. He's an interesting guy in some ways, but he loves driving. He's largely disabled, and he still drives. Is this a problem? Yes. I was talking to him a few years ago where he had a terrible foot injury. He said that to touch the ground was pure agony. It was like, standing on like lava. I said, well, Dad, that's terrible. He said, I know. So you sit down a lot? Yes, I sit down a lot. But you're not driving, are you? Of course I am. Well, which foot is it? Oh, it's the right one. You see, the one you hit the brakes with? Oh, yeah. It must be painful. Yeah. Stop driving, Dad. No, still drive. We love who we are as humans. We love our assertion of power and skill and competence. And being told that computers are better than we are is a bit daunting. And they are better in a lot of ways. Self-driving cars right now are less lethal than you all. Now, we kill, what, 30,000 a year around the world? Computers are not that lethal. Wait a few years before your car insurance starts penalizing you for being a human behind the wheel. That might make sense. What happens in higher education as we think about this? Do we have ways of helping humans think it through? I'm going to guess you might be in a religious field, am I right? Yeah, that was a pretty good guess. We can draw on religion. We can draw on psychology. We can draw on ethics, philosophy, history, literature. We can draw on the sciences to help humanity think, what does it mean to have grown these fantastic silicon children? So, here's the question we're going to end with. All of these different trends that we track, all of these grounded in reality and evidence, which of these is the most powerful in your world? And which is the hardest to predict? I want to leave you with those questions. See, I have to end every presentation with URLs, right? It's a federal law, apparently. So if you want to find out more about this stuff, here are some links. Here's my Twitter handle. I haven't tweeted for an hour, and I already am getting kind of shaky about it. But I want to ask you again those questions. All those trends, which of those is the most likely to impact you and your institution over the next 10, 20, 30 years? I can go back and rewind as much as you like to. And if you don't answer, I will call on you, I promise. What do you think? Which of these trends has the biggest impact in the world? Yes, instructional technology.
So definitely the trend towards the non-traditional student. Talking about the population change and the fact that it's no longer the typical kid who goes to college whose parents went to college. And,
Yeah. Can you hear her?
No. I got myself.
I was just saying it's definitely the change of the traditional college student
Right.
and less of them.
Yeah. And you're at Lehigh?
Yes.
So hang on one second. Is this starting to impact you all? I mean, and that is, is teaching more first generation students an issue? Are you teaching more adult learners? I mean, how's that playing out?
I don't know that I'm exactly the right person in the room to say that, but I definitely know that there are a lot of first generation students. I see one of my colleagues who teaches them.
It's the kind of thing to look for. Thank you. And here's now one of your colleagues who wants to speak, or?
I'm actually on the other side of that as well. I am a non-traditional student.
Great.
Going to DeSales. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and first generation in my branch of the family and everything to go through college. And so I got an associate degree a number of years ago. Now I'm going back for a bachelor's at almost 40. So it's, you know, life altering, and at the same time trying to look at the system from that vantage point,
Yes.
and seeing how daunting it is and how so many schools focus so much on the traditional student and leave the rest of us out to dry. It's kind of insulting in a way. And knowing that you want to be part of it and go back, and you didn't have that path that a lot of other people did,
Yeah.
but you got to do something at some point. It's interesting, and DeSales did a great job of making that happen for me, and I appreciate that a lot.
What's your name?
Nate Ricky.
Nate?
Yep.
So, I mean, think about Nate as a kind of normative student. Is it almost 40?
Yep.
And tell me your name, I'm sorry.
I'm Holly Zekas.
Holly. Thank you, Holly. Those are good examples. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. Yes, back in the back.
Hi, my name is Kelly Kinney. I just spent 33 and a half years in Pashi at Kutztown University.
Wow.
And I directed a student affairs and higher education graduate program.
Nice.
And just retired from Pashi in January, and am officially rewiring as the founding director of a brand new graduate higher education program for DeSales. And as I'm listening to you, it's all impacting what I'm doing because I'm training a new generation of professionals going into higher education. And you know, even thinking about, you know, whether or not, you know, so far in the last 8 to 10 years, I've been running an 80 to 90% job placement rate of my graduate students by the August after graduation. I'm a little bit concerned about that now, you know, particularly as we think about, you know, decreasing in staff positions on college and university campuses. So again, for me, it's all impactful.
I really appreciate that. And congratulations on the one retirement.
Thank you.
That's an amazing, amazing record. I mean, are most of your students looking in the physical area, the local geographical area?
I have students that I have worked with the last 20 years who are all over the country.
Great.
And I have some outside of the country. I have a student in France. I have a former student rather in France, Australia, and the Caribbean, St. Kitts.
Wow.
So they're all over the place and at varying levels. You know, brand new staff positions, but also I have some directors, I have deans, I have vice presidents. I don't have a president yet, but
You're working on it.
So.
Well, that's fantastic. In many ways, if Nate, there's an example of a student, or former student, you're in many ways an example of the current professional, thinking globally. Right? Thank you. Thank you. Yes, hi.
Hi, my name is Christy. I am in enrollment operations at Moravian College.
Good luck.
So, thanks.
After everything I've said, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm still here.
I don't have any alcohol to give you, but I would.
I find it. It's okay.
Good.
One of our biggest pieces is we talk about technology and we talk about the non-traditional, but everybody in Elvac is still very much rooted in the traditional undergraduate campus as well. So for us and for my department, it's finding a way to jump into technology and into the future where some students want that, and we're trying to keep up and walk that fine line of being hip and trendy and not sounding stupid to the 18-year-old, because we're not 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
But also, you have your non-traditional students that are coming back to school and are terrified of the idea that technology is taking over, and that's a huge barrier for them. So how do you make your one student feel comfortable knowing that they're coming into a campus that's not completely robot driven versus the ones that's all they want? You have your students that everybody has a piece of technology in high school, and then you have your students where they come from a socioeconomic area that they don't feel like they can keep up because they share a cell phone in their house or they don't have a computer in their house. So a lot of it is not going too far, but going far enough that you're attracting so many different students and making them all feel like they can succeed and helping them and supporting them to succeed.
Tell me your name, I'm sorry.
Christy?
Christy, thank you very much. That's a fantastic question. And you all can hear okay with the amplification, right? Good. Quick story, Toronto, Canada right now is going through an interesting urban development process. They realize that the number of senior citizens they have who have memory issues and cognitive issues is increasing drastically. So they're trying to think about how to redesign the city. There's some interesting side effects of this. I don't know if any of you have been tracking this. One of them is that they decided to go to highways and roads and increase the median size. Because it turns out if you're crossing a street, there's a lot of cognitive load that goes on. You're watching a whole bunch of different forces and parts of everything else. And if you just cross half the street and then stop, it's a lot easier than doing the whole thing in a row. So you just take the median, instead of making like a strip, make it like a park, you know, make it 10 feet across. Simple move. It's good for everybody, I think. But another one is they're starting to argue for removing tablet computers from public spaces. Because some of the people, we're talking about 70 on up, find that daunting. And if they have cognitive issues, memory issues, they're going to fall back to the technologies they had when they were teenagers. So talking about bringing back knobs and physical buttons, which are more reassuring. So it's an interesting problem to think about. But when you think about designing a city, well, Toronto also has bright, sparkly 18-year-olds. So how do you interweave these, you know, in a way that makes sense for everybody? Campuses are going through similar things. And there are a few things I've been seeing out there in play. One is libraries. Libraries play a heroic role. And we know that one of the great, is anybody here in the library field? Hello, what campus? And what are you? Are you the director? Are you government, serials? What? All of those? No, the director. You're the director. You guys are wonderful. I'm shameless. I'm a librarian fanboy. And because one of the things they do is public libraries provide access to computing for anybody who walks in. So my daughter will walk in and say, oh, okay, I want to do a little 3D animation. I've got some code I just ran for it. And then my father will come in and go, that's a mouse, right? Okay, I think that's a mouse. And they have to serve both of them, right, all the time. So people who don't have computers at home, public libraries are great spaces. Meanwhile, academic libraries are doing a similar function. They might not have instructional designers or instructional technologists on board. They still have to solve all those problems. So libraries play a huge role in many ways in giving it. When I talk to community colleges, often the libraries become this kind of IT center where they provide access to desktop computers, laptop computers, check out all kinds of detail, everything from cameras to phones. I mean, that's one part of the puzzle. Second part is actually researching your student body. I don't know if any of your campuses have done this recently. It's a really interesting exercise. At the very, very least, do a quick survey of everybody on campus, how many devices they use, what operating systems, what software they prefer to use. I mean, that's pretty easy to do. But then do an ethnography and actually follow students around and then track them and see like how many different devices they use. It's really interesting. Williams College did this thing where they were very excited about iPads. You give all the students iPads. And the students wouldn't write on them. They always went to desktop computers to write. Which makes sense in a lot of ways. You think about writing on an iPad is actually kind of tricky, but they didn't expect that, right? So to survey your student body, as well as your faculty and staff, to what you're actually doing. Third thing, liberal arts colleges are a particular special place. I mean, I've worked with them, I've taught them, and I believe in them very closely. One of the things that we do is we have a unique approach to much of the world, including much of the intellectual world. So how do we approach the world of the digital? And we have computer scientists, yes, who have all that firepower to bring to bear. But also, do we have other ways of doing interdisciplinary studies of the digital world? And do we have political scientists who can teach what happens to, let's just pick up, for example, social media and elections, for example. And do we have psychologists who can think about what does it actually mean to do therapy online, which is a major field? Right? Do we have sociologists? Do we have media studies people and so on? Do we have a digital liberal arts? Some colleges claim they do. And under that rubric, do we then have a fourth thing, which is students not as passive consumers, but as makers of digital content? So do you celebrate students making audio, video, games, 3D animations, whatever, which takes a lot of support from the campus, both faculty to make that part of the curriculum, libraries in order to house that and make sure that's preserved, as well as for the IT department to make sure that things actually work. So you can have a kind of liberal arts approach to it, which is both celebratory and skeptical, but then suited to the individual class and, if your campus is the right size, the individual student and their aptitude. It's a very long-winded answer to your question, but it's a really great question. I think we have to keep pushing on it.
We do a pretty good job once they get to campus. All of our incoming freshmen, as part of tuition and fees, get a MacBook and an iPad.
Interesting.
But prior to them coming,
Yeah.
like you were saying, some of it could be more scary than exciting.
It's almost the point of talking about computers. It's kind of how we talk about religion. We try not to do it, and we do it badly. And it's tricky. Have you all used clickers, personal response systems? Have you used these? Yeah, they're a fantastic tool pedagogically. They cost almost nothing, like $10 each or something, and they can really open up the space. And it's fun to ask a population questions that they don't have to identify their answers for. So it'd be fun to do that with computing. You know, how many of you have ever used MATLAB? How many of you have actually used the bottom right button in Microsoft Word, which is actually pretty powerful? And to get people to feel comfortable with saying, I don't know how to do that. What a podcast, I don't know what a podcast is. I just hit play, I don't know what that thing is. I mean, I think because we are so supportive and so student-centered, I think we can do that kind of better solution. Thank you for the question. How about the rest of you? What, are your brains overflowing at this point, or your RAM buffer, or is this just too much to do? Let me ask you a better question. Let me grab the thing. So I mentioned we live in Vermont. Vermont is a very low-tech state. TV is kind of high-tech. There's actually a story that my wife is tired of me telling you, but a few years ago, T-Mobile and AT&T and Sprint did this public release where they said, oh yeah, we covered Vermont with cell phone coverage, we're done. And all of us said, that's not right. So a state government official got a box of phones and drove around the entire state for 2 months, went from every single town to every single town. Just all the phones on, calling, published the results. 1/3 of the state had zero coverage, flat. 1/3 had coverage, you know, like half a bar. And about 1/3 of the state actually had like a couple of bars. The AT&T, et cetera, didn't have a response in public. That's the state that did this. Every year, there's a contest for high school kids where they have to go into their community and find a historic building. Building could be anything. It could be a home, it could be a prison, it could be a fortification, it could just be a department store. They have to research that building. I mean, it's going to primary sources, looking at blueprints, looking at diaries from people from the time, and then secondary sources. Then they had to build a 3D model of that building. These are teenagers, right? And they had to print that 3D model. And we had an annual contest. It's in June. And the contest runners printed this huge map of the state. And the kids took copies of their individual buildings and put them down at their locations in the state. So the kids could take their shoes off and play Godzilla, which is pretty fun. But you could see the state beginning to take shape. And judges, I was one of them, had to go around and talk to all these kids and say, how did you do this? And it was disturbing because the kids were so blasé. Oh yeah, I learned 3D image editing. Took a couple of days, but yeah, I did it. And then someone else said, oh, there was this one house that was built in the 1600s and had this wall, this weird texture. So I spent all day trying to get this kind of rubbly, pebbly wooden structure, and I got it. Another one built this, you can see it here. They built several versions of the same house that you could stack together and pull apart so you could see the interior of them. High school kids, all team-based. You could see their teachers, and teachers are mostly, they did a good job, I don't know how they did it. And they kept walking around doing this, so those kids in that rural state are teenagers. They come to you. Are you ready for that? What are their expectations? Think about that Generation Z or whatever we call it at this point. And how do we reconfigure everything we do so that we can meet the way they are? Now, I'm conscious of time. The clock says it's 5:05. How are we doing? Where is our mistress of ceremonies? Hi, I'm sorry. Do we have more time for more questions? I have questions for them.
One more question, and
Okay.
then we'll move to reception and
Am I between them and drinks and food? One more question. Yes, please. Oh, the library. Right behind you.
So the area I'm concerned about is naturally digital literacies and how we work with that in students. And we've heard a lot about information overload, but I'm more interested in kind of information blindness. So when you show that video screen, the way students are absorbing a lot of information is very passively through videos, through images. And yet they have so much more information now, but may not always be able to be the critical thinkers or be able to process that information. So how do we prepare our students in this new information world where everything is, they're receiving information more passively, and they're resistant to text, which is more an active engagement with information. And we're producing the type of people who can react to these kind of things in a more meaningful way.
That's a fantastic question, and I have a book-length answer that I have to hold back on. Tell me your name. I'm sorry.
Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Did we meet before?
Yes, I remember a couple years ago.
And you remember me? And you haven't run off yet. That's good. Thank you. This is a fantastic question. And digital literacy. So let's just go back in the time machine for a second. The 1960s, a field arose called media literacy. And the whole idea there was to teach people to be critical of then current media, TV, magazines, radio, movies. And there's a whole series of pedagogies based on that. A lot of textbooks, a lot of classes. We can draw on that now. In fact, one of the fun things, I don't know if you've ever seen this, is to give kids a magazine and tell them to tear out all the ads. And then when they do, to see what's left of the magazine. It's a very interesting technique. Now, fast forward a little bit to the 1980s. Before the web existed, when the internet was still pretty rare, a bunch of librarians said, you know, in the future, people will be able to find whatever they want online. They'll have to hunt it down, and librarians will always be there. We need to figure out a way to teach them how to do this. They came to the field of information literacy, and they've been doing that ever since. About 10 years ago, people said, okay, this is all good. We should call it just digital literacy now, because so much of it is digital. So in the field of digital literacy, there are tons and tons of practices. Do you guys use the CRAAP test? C-R-A-A-P?
Not really.
Good. It's a great name, but there's protocols, there's for teaching people just how to find stuff online, how to suss it out. There's a great guy in Vancouver named Michael Caulfield, who does a lot of great work on this. But we also have the ways of, again, I'm telling you your name again.
Tina.
No. There you are. Sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you.
Kristen.
Christy, I was talking about students as makers, and that's another thing that we have to celebrate. And that's hard, because a lot of the technology is against it. Over there is my laptop. It's a couple-year-old MacBook, and it's plugged into the wall. The reason it's plugged into the wall is because it's such a nice MacBook that I can't change the battery. Apple doesn't want me to have that power. So the battery's dead, so I actually have to take it into the Apple store, where I guess I will feel cool and hip and trendy if I'm there, and pay a lot of money to have it fixed by the dealer, right? Lots of computers are designed this way, to prevent you from fiddling with it, to prevent you from getting your hands dirty. I used to teach elementary school kids Scratch. It's computer programming language written for kids. And it's fantastic, because they get this experience of, whoa, I can make the computer do things. We teach digital storytelling. We have students make video or audio, which gives them that power. And once they make video or audio, and they see a commercial or an ad, they get kind of skeptical. I know how they did that. Lighting wasn't too good. It's really empowering to be able to do this. So I think a key part of this is to empower students to make stuff. And I think our pedagogy should be about that. So we have students make PowerPoint, yes. Make Word documents, yes. Make web pages of all kinds using WordPress or whatever. Give students the power to make stuff. I think makes them more critical, makes them more skeptical. But on top of that, we have to support them in being critical and skeptical. That's not always easy, because they might be critical or skeptical of us, and we don't always necessarily approve of that. It's one of the secrets of mobile devices. If everybody here in this room has a phone, just say hypothetically, and I show a chart, so it's like, that can't be right. Quickly check it out. I like this. For me, this is a good fact-checking thing. It's like peer review, right? It's a good balance. Not everyone likes that, but we have to support them in that. And even if the students do crazy stuff as a result, say they protest climate change, right? But we have to, I think, give them that power. That's a long answer. I seriously made my book-length answer. There's a lot of depth to this. If you go to my blog, you can find a lot of tedious blog posts about this. But I think this is one of the most powerful things we should focus on. Thank you for asking, Tina.
Thank you.
That was a long question.
That was the last question. So please join me in thanking our speaker, Brian Alexander, for being here. We invite you all now to join us for a cocktail reception and to continue the conversation with each other and with Brian while he's here this evening. So again, we really appreciate you joining us this evening to celebrate the end of our 50th anniversary celebration. We hope that you found this series to be valuable. We hope that it's given you some things to think about as you think about what does our future here in the Lehigh Valley and higher education look like. And we look forward to continuing to chat with you through the rest of this evening. Thanks.